Hi,
Hello, love. You know
how
what?
are you?
I'm amazing. I did what you're not supposed to do, which is I got on my phone as soon as I woke up this morning
Yeah,
and I listened to your live yesterday and like you were just you were more tuned in and versed than I knew. I mean, I felt it on the heart level, but like knowing the cosmology of things and it was amazing. Yeah.
thank you. That's very, very beautiful to reflect that. I so appreciate it. My grandma used to say water seeks its own level, and you and I connected in a really like deep way early on, and that's probably why we speak a similar language.
Mm-hmm.
And you wrote another book to bring us to more awareness of this real reality with a capital R. And I was just saying, we all came to this world to experience this one gift called love and to give it and receive it. And we have these egos that love to protect us. And in doing so, deny us allowing in more of this yummy gift. And so let's talk about this new book because there's so much to talk about in it. Like
Mm-hmm.
why, why did you have more to say on this topic? What was left unsaid in your other pieces that you felt you needed to say now?
Oh, it wasn't it growing, life, evolving, pain, suffering, dark night of the soul, radiance, getting to the other side. Like that was it. And the question that like really built my life and my career for a long time was how do I want to feel? And it is an essential question. It's part of being a spiritual grown up. You all should be asking yourself, how do you want to feel? And navigating around that. But it's not the end game. And so the revelation for me was bad day, rough times, not feeling my core desired feelings, still felt connected to God, still felt useful. And it really got down to I was in the depths of my despair and I was a good friend today. So for me, it's all about relationship containers. And then that combined with more mystical exploration and research about where our feelings really come from, that they really are driven through the subconscious, which is a hard pill to swallow. Just like, really? Because, here's the thing, none of your feelings are original. They are not coming from the conscious part of yourself. Your feelings are actually not coming from your higher self. The soul is not dispensing your feelings. Like, that is a big one to get.
That's so big.
Yeah. And when
Yeah.
you get that, you realize, like, wow, okay, let's just start with love is not a feeling. Love is not an emotion. Love is a higher state of being. Then you have a new question, which is, what do I want to be? What do I want to embody? That's the arc. That's the evolution.
I mean, that is so huge. I want to go into that more. That was part of what I was talking about on the live, right? This idea that we don't realize that our bodies are addicted to suffering because cortisol is so addictive. It's more nicotine. And just when I've become newly acquainted with the Kardashians. I missed somehow
Where
for
have you been?
all 20 years and just saw it and became newly into it. And they just had Dr. Amen on the show where he does a brain scan of Kendall and Chloe's brain. And he's like, yeah, so you know how you think like you're feeling really down? So here's what's going on in your circuitry. Like I can scan your brain and show you what's just being wired and the chemicals that are being pumped into your body, so that might be contributing, right? It's like, it's not like, oh, you're just, like you said, it's not like your higher self saying, this is your cross to bear. It's so much more than that happening that we could actually set down, that we actually have some more control over when we become conscious of the subconscious. So let's talk about that. What are the things that you said? You were just sharing how you were researching this, both the mystical aspect and also just the the way that the mind works. So tell us more about that.
Well, this comes from work I've been doing specifically with a healer for the last 7 or so years. It comes with looking at models around dark night of the soul. You know, this is like Saint John of the Cross stuff. This is science. This is cortisol. And then this is just my lived experience, which is being happy is not necessarily connected to me feeling like my full self and meaningful and purposeful. Your point that you were, you know, making about suffering and cortisol, like for me, the esoteric match to that is that the ego is addicted to suffering and separation. And this was the big revelation for me, is that I used to have this approach where I thought my ego is outside of me. It's this thing that I need to dominate. Like, to be a more spiritual, loving, evolved person, I need to get my ego in check. And that is not it at all. That actually creates more anxiety, panic attacks, suffering. I created my ego. You created your fear. You created your neuroses. That dynamic that is so pissing you off in that relationship, that's your thought, baby. And why would you disown anything you created? I mean, any mother, you'd never disown your child, right? If you were well and healthy. So I took a different approach. This is hard. This is the work we're all hearing about now. This is it, where you have to love what you hate most about yourself, and not just love it. Like, you go from like, you know, I have this arrogance. Ugh. You know, you're conscious enough to not, you're not, you know, even the garbage truck guy right now is agreeing with us right now. We're getting the honks. You're conscious enough to know, like, that's painful. That's not what I want to be. I am more than this. So, like, whatever your thing is, you're arrogant, you're greedy, you're needy. Everybody got their thing. And instead of trying to change it, this is way easier said than done, but instead of trying to self-help it into being better, you actually have reverence for it. So you move into, wow, every time I'm needy, it brings my attention to how much love I have to give. It actually brings my attention to how, like, I am so self-sufficient. Every time I am arrogant, wow, it actually brings my attention to how modest I am, how nuanced. That's such a word in our space, right? Is nuanced. So it's reverence. And then you get into that level of consciousness where everything is love is not a concept. It's actually a practice. You are finding the beauty in your most ugly behavior.
Yeah. Recently, I posted another clip of me speaking with my rabbi, who really was probably like the person who hit Control Alt Delete on my life the most. He lives in the old city of Jerusalem. I lived there with him for 2.5 years in my early 20s, learning Kabbalah. And he said to me recently that he doesn't really watch any TV, but he saw a clip on YouTube of Batman. And he said there was a scene where Batman is talking to the Joker, and he says to the Joker, "This is it. I'm going to end you." And the Joker said, "No, you won't. Because without me, you wouldn't be Batman." And so my rabbi said, listen, you know, your ego is hoping you're going to overcome it. Your ego is also working on behalf of the highest high. Because without that, what do you get to jump over, right? And so we all have an anti-self. We all have a sabotager. We all have, if you put something in the sun, it has an equal shadow. And that is part of the video game that you're playing. That contrast, like you said, that's a gift. And Rupert Spira told me something recently, which, you know, I said to him, listen, I've been at this a while, and my nervous system still has a hard time tolerating immense joy. When there is immense love, my nervous system starts to get wired in a way that it gets aroused, and then I want to put in some kind of fear, some kind of ego, some kind of distance. And he said, of course, because he said, this was so beautiful. I'll let you respond to this. He said, imagine a moth. We've all seen it dancing towards the light. It loves the light. But why does it keep moving away? Because this light, which is all it wants, if it actually touches it, it dies.
Guys,
So your ego, if it fully, completely relinquishes into joy, because your ego is the part of you that's there to protect you. It's the fight or flight. It's the part of you constantly checking exits so you don't just float off and get caught unaware. It's why Brene Brown says it's your most vulnerable state, being in a state of joy. You feel really scared on some level.
I don't agree with that.
Okay, well, I want you to respond to that anyway, because I thought that was so beautiful that he said, if your ego actually allowed you to feel fully enjoy it, your ego would die, and it doesn't want to. So, but tell us more about that and why you don't agree with that. Let's start there.
Mm-hmm. I'm down with what Rupert is saying, which is we're here in duality. I am energy in body. We have these dimensions. So there's always going to be this contrast, this push and pull. And part of that contrast is wisdom and ignorance, and light and dark, and higher self and ego. And yeah, you get closer to the joy, you get closer to your higher self. And the darkness, the density is going to say, but what about me? And you're going to say, and this is where you become the God of your own life. You say, I love you and you're coming with me.
Yeah.
And so the darkness becomes light. It all gets back to light. But this is really, this is a conversation about the triplicity, right? And this is where the mind gets tripped up, is like, how can it all be love? And how can it all be God and light if clearly there is this experience of darkness and separation and evil and pushing against? And it's like, all that stuff has just forgotten, but it all still comes from source. It all gets back to the light. It's like there's the light, and then there's the light being the light in this dimension, and then there's the shadow that the light casts. But something creates it all, which is so inclusive. Like, and but where I step aside from like agreeing with joy being threatening is, I don't think joy is our most vulnerable place. I think when we're in joy, we are more robust and radiant and strong and clear thinking, true reality thinking than ever. What happens is the ego comes in, the wounded self comes in and says, you should be afraid of this because this is unfamiliar to me. Joy is not how we live. We don't live in a constant state of joy. And so that's what's scary. But the joy is what's real. And what I have learned myself, and what I often say to people, is that moment of intimacy, that connection you had with someone, the high of the day, that was you being out of this illusion. That was a moment of truth. It's just, we don't believe it because, for most of us, we're just stringing together those pearls of true reality moments, and trying to get back there.
It's interesting. Like Esther Hicks will say that, we have this notion with our joy, but with our physical health, we expect to feel healthy physically 100% of the time. Like if you were feeling, we're honest about your joy level every week that goes by. It's like today's Friday, right? So how much of this week were you at peak joy? Were you at peak joy 95% of your week? Were you at peak joy 18% of your week? Peak joy. And people are like, no, I was at peak joy 1% and actually not at all this week. So then
I didn't believe it.
Right.
I got my 1% and questioned it.
So she would say, like, isn't that interesting? Because with your physical health, if you went week after week and you didn't feel fully healthy, and you said, well, yeah, no, 70% of the time I feel really nauseous, your friend would say to you, go to a doctor. Or if you said, no, 68% of the day I have a headache that I can't bear, they'd be like, that's not a thing. Like you need, but we accept that we should feel healthy physically 100% of the time. We don't even believe it's a possibility to get beyond the fight or flight, this one level of the brain where it keeps firing and wiring this cortisol. We believe that that is life. That's adulting. That's being here. It's like the more you meditate, the more you memorize how it feels, you actually get longer periods of time where it's actually not your experience. And then you physically memorize how it feels, and you don't keep sucking in the exhaust fumes of cortisol, and you go, oh, that's actually not a thing. I'm not meant to be unhappy most of the day. I'm really actually made, just like a palm tree is made to thrive, so am I. Just like a dolphin is made to thrive all day, every day, so am I. The only thing not thriving in this entire ecosystem is a human being who is perceiving the world as separate. When you perceive the world as separate, there's scarcity, there's heaviness, the other waves are out to capture you. It's like, no, you and these other waves are this ocean, and there's no problems. They all disappear, all of them. You're just perceiving that things are separated and they're actually not. So you keep going into fight or flight. And that's what you can actually be liberated from.
And this is why you healing you is the greatest activism that you can enact. You just, I know this is going to sound like, listen, yes, you be in the heartbreak and the devastation of what's happening on the planet. You don't push it away. You cry with others. You make your donations. You realize, you know, women who are fighting to dress a particular way. We
haven't stopped.
Really, we are not all free. Not all free. And you feel that. And this is, you know, we hear so much about expanding consciousness and being spacious. Spaciousness, being your own parent, all of those phrases we have, is when you say, I'm going to hold this pain and I'm going to do everything I can right now to choose joy. I'm going to be conscious of this part of my body that's aching, and I'm going to be aware of my vitality. I'm going to be conscious of the flooding that's happening, and it's going to help me be more grateful for my cozy, warm apartment. So it's like you walk through aware, and you choose what you're going to focus on. But you carry the pain with you. You don't, there's no pushing away of the pain anymore, everybody.
I mean, the way that I look at it is a day, not if you live in Alaska, but if you live in another place, you typically get 12 hours of sunlight, and more or less you get 12 hours of darkness. And if there was 24 hours of light, and that's what we all experience, we wouldn't know what light is. We would just say, there's this thing happening. But then darkness, we go, oh, that's darkness, and that's light. And in this universe, there is balance. And so for every negative contrast that exists, there is an equal amount of light. And so to me, it's interesting that we keep talking about it, even because it's like, that's just the way it is. There's balance in gravity. There's balance in everything. So with the seasons, you don't go, oh my God, it's winter. Everything is dying. It's dying. It's bleak. It's dying. There's no life on the trees. You're like, it's amazing. It's gorgeous. I love the snow. I love the winter, because when after the winter comes the spring. We are constantly, right? People who are dealing with very hard things, they create opportunities for people to have compassion. There's so much going on an energetic dimension. Like I was saying the other day, that reading Einstein recently, I've been reading it so much over the last 20 years, but Einstein says, hey guys, there's not 3 dimensions, there's 10, right? So the 3D, this physical thing you perceive, the fourth dimension is time, the fifth dimension is beyond space and time. And if you keep going, the universe is so elastic, it's got so many different vibrations, there's so much Dogs can hear whistles that we can't hear, right? There's things you can't see. So there's many dimensions to what's actually happening. And this is just scientific, right? This is just really seeing reality as it is, not reality as it isn't. When Deepak Chopra was with me recently, he's like, do you know you have 55 trillion cells? That's more than the stars in the Milky Way. And as you play a piano or eat dinner or go to sleep or make a baby, your cells are charting the rhythm, the circadian rhythms of the planets and the stars, whether you know it or not. They know it. They're doing that. That's how smart your body is. That's how in tune you are connected to the rings of Saturn. You just don't see it. But just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not true. Doesn't mean it's not happening. So to me, it's amazing. It's like people just keep choosing a focus of what feels like they should choose. And meanwhile, there's this whole picture to look at. Step back, see it, feel it, right? And then, oh my gosh, how much more well-being can you add to this one symphony? How much more can you add to this wholeness, to this ocean? And that's really what we're talking about. So we want to be more loving. So tell us in your book and in your life, how are you helping us do that? What can we do today? Today, by the end of today, how can we be more loving?
You can choose loving thoughts. And there's a characteristic, I think there's a set of characteristics for loving thoughts. One is you have to believe it. So if you are, if you're standing in the mirror and wanting a perfectly healthy body, you can't give yourself a fake affirmation that I am in perfect health, I am at the weight I want, when you're not. You're lying to yourself. It creates a schism. But if you can believe that you have the capacity for perfect health and look at yourself and say, I have the capacity to heal. And that's the loving thought you believe that day. And then that seeps more into your psyche. And then maybe the next day is, I am healing. And this is the warriorship that is talked about so much in the personal development space. The warriorship is every low vibe thought, every thought that tells you separate, not enough, etc., against yourself and other people. You have to replace it without judgment. It's so refined. So it's like, you don't get down on yourself for criticizing yourself. No more criticism on top of the criticism. Just stop. You witness it. You're big. You're spacious. Had that thought. Doesn't even have to be interesting. You don't even need to be interested in your thoughts, really. Had that thought. I'm going to choose this thought because I am creating this. And the thought is a loving thought. The other characteristic of loving thoughts is there's nothing rebellious about it. So sticking with the body metaphor, this is not about saying, it's this energy, right? You can say the same thing, but with different energy. You're not saying, I am so beautiful and attractive, which has got this little kind of, screw you world vibe to it. Forget it. It's not you against the world. It's not even you against your shadow. It's you with your soul. So the declaration is, from my love, I am beautiful and attractive. And there's no claw to it. And then I think there's like a universal quality to loving thoughts. Like, it's going to work for you. It would probably work for someone else. And you need to write those thoughts down, choose those thoughts 900 times a day. This is the training. This is it. Energy follows thought. This is the work.
I want to say something to you that you did for me personally. First of all, I don't know if anybody knows this, why would you? But years ago, before I ever had a podcast, before I ever wrote a book, before I ever did anything, you were the first person that I saw in the world who I thought, that is a model of a whole way of being in the world that I would want to emulate. And it actually is the reason I decided to be part of this space, creating a platform, starting a podcast. So Danielle, thank you for embodying magic. One, I don't think I ever told you that.
No, that's amazing.
Two, because I knew you before I knew Brene, anybody online. I didn't know any of that stuff. But anyway, number one, Number two, you said to me the first time I had you on my show 4 or 5 years ago, you said, you can be crushing it. Your friends can say to you, look at you. You have a big, beautiful business. You go to yoga. You have wheatgrass shots. You're nailing it.
Yeah.
You can know inside this is an addiction. You're addicted to productivity. You're on the outside looking like you're checking the boxes. And at that time when we were recording that first episode, we were just doing it audio. I was crying, sitting on the floor, crying. And I was like, she's talking to me. And you did. You said, listen to that. And so what I want to say is, since everything's a freaking hologram and all we do all day long is we perceive based upon aspects of you. You know why you didn't like what your mother-in-law said? Something in you is coming back at you, right? It's a resistance you have. So it's like, if you want to be loving, one of the big, big things is how could you be more loving to yourself today? How could you be in resonance? And one of my favorite new things I learned about a year ago, I've been saying it over and over, is that if you take two guitars and you put them on a table next to each other and you pluck the F string on this guitar, the F string on the other guitar moves, and the C string, if you pluck it, the C string on the other guitar moves, because in actual vibrational form, in this reality that we live in, you can see it scientifically that we resonate. And then what resonates in us resonates in other people. So if you want to give other people love, you have to have it in yourself. You have to open your heart. You have to be a mommy to yourself. You have to love on yourself. You have to set down your addiction to whatever it is and sit beside yourself as a loving witness.
Yes, and you can feel crap about yourself and you are still capable of loving somebody else. Because I'm not down with this theory of you got to love yourself to love other people. If we're all one, as we are, what does it matter what instigates the love? Whether it's you getting over your own self-criticism or it's you just being helpful and gentle with somebody. And because I've seen this and I've experienced this on my, on rough days of people who, low self-esteem, not have it together people. And they got moved enough to forgive their brother after all those years, or to volunteer, or to change their business model. And that expands that. It just comes back. It's that infinity loop. So if we all needed to be so in love with ourselves to love other people unconditionally, that we'd be hooped. We would not be making any progress.
Yeah. I mean, really, it's twofold. It's what you just said. And when we give things away, that's when we actually receive them anyway.
Yeah.
You could have money sitting in a bank account, but you don't feel it until you give it. You buy it. You spend money on the retreat. You just felt it because you spent it. You give, and then you actually get back what you just gave. So there is a truth in that. And what does it mean to love yourself? What is the self? Well, the only thing that's the self that's separate from you and me being one is this ego, right? So if it's hard to love your ego, I get that, because we've created these pretty gnarly egos. But if you could love somebody else, that really is loving yourself, because there's only one self. This ocean really is only one ocean. The waves are not separate. That's impossible. So that's another way that you can get access to it. And we just celebrated Rosh Hashanah, and the rabbi at services here said, a lot of you are sitting with your kids, so I'm going to talk about Frozen because you've all seen it. That, Elsa was so hard on herself for so long. She had so much shame around this thing that she felt she was doing when she, hurt her sister and could hurt people with this power. So she locked herself away with all this shame. And he said, what winds up happening is her sister loves her anyway. And then she exclaims, love, of course, love will thaw this. And he said, shame is keeping yourself locked away, keeping a secret. When you speak something out loud, right? And you say, I'm broken. Someone else goes, me too, right? I have an ego that's broken too. And all of a sudden, from that place of releasing shame, you can heal it. You can overcome it. And so I think that is one big step for mankind, is to let go of shame. Because who do you want to be friends with? The person who goes to lunch with you and tells you she has sex every night and everything's perfect? Or the person who's like, yeah, I'm a hot mess and I'm figuring some things out and some things are feeling really good. And what's with you? You know, like I think there's just this perception that in order to love yourself and other people, there's an expectation, and then there's a lot of secrets for no reason. I think we're all capable of being brave and broken and sabotaging, and it's like because that's what your ego does. That's, you know, and the greater power you have for good, the greater your ego is going to come at you because it's got to have a balance of shadow there. So what is it? It's just something we can all marvel at and witness together. So I love that you're doing this work. I love that you're writing these books. Tell us when the book is coming out. It's very soon. It's in like a week, right?
Yeah, the book is out on October 11th. And what's happening now is, well, I'm starting to hear about the book, which is great. So I'm hearing that, you know, the book is an experience. You become more gentle when you when you get into this material. Some people are saying it feels like a little affronting, and that's a good thing. It's like what they've been needing. The general response is it's right on time. And the specifics of timing is it's available wherever you want to grab books now. And if you go get a couple copies and you come to daniellelaporte.com/howtobeloving, then you get an invite into church. So on Sunday, October 16th, we're going to do an online 2-hour church event. Leanne Rhymes is going to come and sing to us from her new album, God's Work, which is beautiful and sublime. And everybody should go to Spotify right now and dance all weekend and cry all weekend to God's Work. And beautiful chorus who feel like, you know, the OG songstresses of this space are going to be singing for us. And then Michael Beckwith is going to be there to just do what only Michael can do with the blessing. And then I'm going to throw down on True Identity.
Oh God, look what you created. That is
It's great. It's really great. Yeah. Yeah. And all sorts of other lovely things. But the vision is that there's a softening that happens through how to be loving. Yeah.
it's so beautiful. And what's so beautiful is your unrelenting wanting to just keep giving. You're unrelenting wanting to melt away more suffering. And what's really beautiful, Danielle, is that you go first. It's so obvious that you are the one you're teaching first. And as you jump over these beautiful divine hoops, you are able to hold our hands and help us jump again and find there's a hole through the looking glass. There's a whole other way to show up here and set things down. And it's been so cool to watch you continuously like come to the table and say, where is there more space? Where is there more space? And then you're bringing us there. So thank you for doing that work. And thank you to everybody for being on. And I can't even imagine how anyone doesn't want to be at that event. So go get the book because that's an amazing event. And then you'll have the book too.
Yeah.
Anne Rhymes, Michael Beckwith, beautiful chorus, and you is like such a jackpot. Is there anything you want to leave us with today that you're hoping when people read this book, they take with them?
Yes. That forgiving is your natural inclination. So everybody, like, actually, you want to forgive. It's your default. So when you move into, you know, accountability and I need to be right, and you know, the ego is so tricky. It's like, for spiritual reasons, you know, out of love, I'm going to make sure there's some accountability here. I just want to say, no, 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 no. You know what you really want to do? You really actually want to let it go. And I think if we just entertain the concept that forgiving is your most natural response and to not talk yourself out of it, revolutionary.
That is so good. I love it so much. When Marianne Williamson was with me, I said, what's one thing everyone can do today? And she said, think of 3 people you're holding a grudge towards. And even if your side of the road you think is squeaky clean and theirs isn't, even then, send them a text and say, I love you, because that is going to rebuild the world. And I love that you said the same thing, like that's where we get back to, like, yes. So good, Danielle. I wish we had all the time in the world, but we really do on some level. This,
Yes, we really do.
this was
We're doing an IG live in another dimension right now while
Yep,
everybody goes and buys the book. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. We will put the links up and we will make this IG Live a podcast episode and we'll put that out and we'll put the links there and all of the things.
Right on. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for your light. Thank you, everybody. Mwah, mwah. Love.
Bye.
Bye.